For decades, Clint Eastwood and Robert Redford have stood as towering figures in Hollywood, two men whose names became synonymous with grit, independence, and timeless storytelling. Eastwood, the stoic gunslinger turned master director, and Redford, the golden boy whose charisma defined an era, seemed to live parallel lives in the spotlight. Fans often wondered, were they rivals? Were they friends, or were they simply two legends respecting each other from afar? Now, at 95 years old, Clint Eastwood has finally spoken up about Robert Redford. His words reveal not just admiration, but a window into a relationship that was far more complex than the public ever realized. For years, tabloids speculated about tension, about missed collaborations, about the unspoken competition between two of cinema's most iconic leading men. But behind the cameras and the magazine covers lies a truth that few have ever heard, until now. Eastwood's reflections carry the weight of a man who has lived almost a century, one who has seen Hollywood's golden age rise and fade. His remarks about Redford are not mere gossip, but a meditation on legacy, on survival, and on the strange bond shared by men who shaped an industry yet often walked very different paths. In today's story, we uncover what Eastwood finally revealed about Robert Redford, the untold history of their connection, and why this moment of honesty resonates so deeply with fans around the world. Long before Clint Eastwood and Robert Redford became icons of American cinema, they were two young men chasing uncertain dreams in an industry that seemed almost impossible to conquer. Their early careers reveal striking differences and surprising similarities that set the stage for decades of comparison, admiration, and speculation. Clint Eastwood's journey began in the 1950s, when Hollywood was undergoing massive change. Television was threatening the movie business, and studios were scrambling to find new stars. Eastwood, tall and lean with a quiet intensity, struggled at first. He was rejected multiple times for being too tall or not photogenic enough. His big break didn't come until Rawhide, a TV western that turned him into a household name. But it was in Europe, working with director Sergio Leone, that Eastwood truly transformed into a star. With a fistful of dollars and the good, the bad, and the ugly, he became the face of the spaghetti western, redefining the archetype of the American cowboy. Robert Redford's path was almost the opposite. While Eastwood built his career on silence, grit, and rugged masculinity, Redford leaned into charm, intellect, and versatility. His breakout came with Barefoot in the Park alongside Jane Fonda, and later with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. By the late 1960s, Redford had established himself as the ultimate leading man, handsome, articulate, and relatable. Though they never co-starred in a film during their prime, both men were often mentioned in the same breath. Hollywood insiders noted the contrast. Eastwood was the stoic gunslinger. Redford was the golden boy. Yet both represented a new kind of masculinity on screen, one that resonated deeply with audiences during a time of social and cultural upheaval. By the 1970s, Eastwood and Redford had transcended acting. Eastwood began directing, proving he wasn't just a tough guy with a squint. Films like Play Misty for Me and High Plains Drifter showed his eye for storytelling. Redford, meanwhile, co-founded the Sundance Institute, reshaping the landscape of independent film. Each, in his own way, was building more than a career. They were building legacies. What's fascinating is that despite their parallel trajectories, Eastwood and Redford's paths rarely crossed publicly. Fans speculated about tension. Were they competing for the same roles? Was one jealous of the other's success? The truth was far more nuanced. Insiders revealed that while Hollywood loved to pit them against each other, both men admired what the other brought to the screen. Eastwood reportedly respected Redford's vision and his commitment to socially conscious storytelling, while Redford admired Eastwood's discipline and his ability to turn seemingly simple characters into enduring legends. Still, the absence of collaboration fueled curiosity. Why didn't two of the most bankable stars of their time ever share the screen? Some said their styles were too different. Others suggested that both preferred control, Eastwood often directing himself, Redford carefully curating his roles, and later stepping behind the camera. Whatever the reason, their parallel rise only deepened the sense of mystery surrounding their relationship. In hindsight, the 1960s and 1970s were not just the decades where Eastwood and Redford became stars, they were the decades where they became symbols. Eastwood embodied a rough, unflinching view of manhood, while Redford represented intelligence and charm. Together, though separate, they mirrored the changing ideals of America itself. And as Clint Eastwood now reflects on Robert Redford at the age of 95, it's impossible to ignore how those early years shaped the unspoken bond between them, a bond forged not by competition, but by a shared journey through the toughest business in the world. By the time the 1970s rolled into the 1980s, Clint Eastwood and Robert Redford were no longer just movie stars. They were cultural institutions. And with such status came speculation. Hollywood thrives on rivalries, and for decades the press loved to pit Eastwood against Redford, even when the two men themselves rarely addressed each other publicly. What emerged was a mythology that fans and tabloids eagerly consumed, blurring the line between truth and invention. The so-called rivalry often boiled down to image. Eastwood was the unshakable cowboy, the no-nonsense detective, the man of few words. Redford, in contrast, was the polished intellectual, often playing thoughtful heroes or conflicted men grappling with moral dilemmas. To the press, these archetypes weren't just roles, they were symbols of two very different Americas. Eastwood represented grit and survival. Redford embodied refinement and conscience, and because they stood for such distinct ideals, the public assumed they must secretly dislike one another. Magazines of the era often speculated that Eastwood and Redford were in a quiet battle for dominance at the box office. When Redford starred in The Sting or All the President's Men, the press immediately compared the numbers to Eastwood's Dirty Harry sequels or his westerns. Whenever one released a critical darling, the other was asked to comment. Reporters loved to fan the flames even if neither man publicly took the bait. Adding fuel to the fire were the near-miss collaborations. Insiders whispered that Redford had once been considered for roles in films that later became Eastwood staples, and vice versa. The most persistent rumor was that Redford had been eyed for Dirty Harry before Eastwood signed on. Another claimed Eastwood was once considered for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. While neither story was ever confirmed, these rumors painted a picture of two men circling the same projects, with fate deciding who walked away with the prize. Still, beneath the gossip, there was also respect. Industry veterans who worked with both men often described them as consummate professionals, different in temperament, but united in their seriousness about the craft. Directors admired Redford's sensitivity and ability to elevate a script, while they marveled at Eastwood's efficiency and toughness on set. To those who knew them personally, the rivalry felt more like a media invention than a lived reality. Yet the myth of competition persisted. Fans would debate endlessly. Who was the better actor, the bigger star, the greater filmmaker? Redford's move into directing with ordinary people, which won him an Oscar, was seen as a challenge to Eastwood's growing reputation behind the camera. When Eastwood later stunned the industry with Unforgiven and Million Dollar Baby, it seemed like the pendulum swung back his way. Each man's triumph was framed as a silent message to the other, even if neither spoke publicly about it. What made the myth so enduring was that both Eastwood and Redford remained enigmatic. Neither indulged in scandal, and both lived largely private lives outside the spotlight. In a town obsessed with headlines, their silence created room for speculation. The less they said about each other, the more the press imagined tension. Looking back now at the age of 95, Clint Eastwood dismisses much of the rivalry talk. For him, the truth was simple. Redford was a peer, someone who carved his own path with integrity. Eastwood's late-in-life comments reveal a man who was never threatened by Redford, but rather intrigued by the way he built an empire not through swagger, but through intellect and vision. The Hollywood myths may have kept fans entertained, but the reality was far more grounded. Two men who, despite the noise around them, respected each other's place in the cinematic landscape. When a man reaches the age of 95, every word carries a different weight. For Clint Eastwood, Reflecting on Robert Redford isn't just about revisiting an old colleague's career. It's about acknowledging a lifetime lived in parallel, and about facing the reality of legacy, mortality, and the fleeting nature of fame. His decision to speak up now, after decades of silence, is both surprising and deeply moving. Eastwood has never been one for sentimentality. His public persona has always been that of the stoic figure, measured, direct, and economical with words. Yet when asked about Redford, Clint's response revealed a rare vulnerability. He admitted that age brings a clarity you don't have when you're younger. The rivalries, the comparisons, the endless chatter of Hollywood, it all fades. What remains are the people who, in their own way, walked beside you through history. For Eastwood, Robert Redford is one of those people. Clint described Redford not just as an actor or filmmaker, but as a man who lived with conviction. That conviction, he explained, was something he always admired, even if he never said it publicly. In Hollywood, where trends shift overnight and loyalty is scarce, Redford's unwavering dedication to his principles, be it in storytelling, in his activism, or in his personal life, stood out. To Clint, that kind of integrity is rarer than talent. He also acknowledged the strange bond that forms between men who never worked directly together, yet who were constantly measured against one another. Clint compared it to two cowboys riding different trails, but always seeing the same horizon. They didn't need to share the screen to understand one another, because each recognized the same struggle, the grind of staying relevant, the burden of fame, the effort of carving out space in an industry that often swallows people whole. Mortality, too, loomed large in his reflections. At 95, Clint knows the clock is ticking. He spoke candidly about how seeing Redford continue to work, to direct, and to advocate for causes inspired him to keep going in his own career. There was no envy in his tone, only respect. He even admitted that he regrets never having collaborated with Redford, calling it one of Hollywood's missed opportunities. Fans have long echoed that sentiment, dreaming of a film where the stoic gunslinger met the golden idealist. Clint's words confirmed that he, too, saw the potential in what never was. What struck listeners most was Clint's acknowledgement that their legacies are intertwined. He said, "When people talk about my generation of actors, Redford's name will always be right there. And that's how it should be." It was a statement free of ego, a recognition that history doesn't remember individuals in isolation, but as part of a greater story. For Clint, sharing that space with Robert Redford is something he now considers an honor. In closing, Eastwood reflected on what truly endures. Not the awards, not the box office numbers, not even the mythologies spun by tabloids. What lasts, he said, are the values you leave behind. How you carried yourself, how you treated others, and whether you left the world a little better than you found it. By that measure, Clint believes Redford succeeded. And in admitting that, Clint offered his own quiet lesson, that even the toughest cowboy can tip his hat to another rider on the trail. As Eastwood's words spread, fans were struck not by scandal or rivalry, but by the dignity of two men who defined an era. At 95, Clint Eastwood's voice trembles a little, but it carries more weight than ever. His tribute to Robert Redford is not just about one man speaking of another. It's about a generation of legends passing into history, leaving behind stories, values, and films that will live long after they are gone.